Hey guys, so we've gone over moving monsters, we've gone over shooting monsters. This last one I want to do is going to be a shooting monster or homing monster. And what I want to do is I want to create kind of two different kinds of homing monsters. The first one is going to be kind of like a homing missile. Okay, it's going to be kind of like it's a derivation of our bullet in a way, to where what I wanted to do is I wanted to home onto the player. Really simple, kind of easy to do. It's going to need like two commands, and so it'll just be something that's going to home in on the player and make contact with them. The second kind is I want to go use that same kind of situation, only I want it to be activated. I want it to be able to once it's activated, it's going to home in on the player, sort of like a zombie that doesn't notice the player, and then once you get within a certain such range, it's going to activate. Okay, and we're going to use some triggers for this stuff. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and go to Game Object. Let's go to Component, Create Other. Let's go and just create a sphere. There you are, Mr. Sphere Monster. I love the sphere monsters. All right, so here's our first guy. I'm going to call this one Homing Missile. Okay, for the moment. So this is going to be our homing missile. And for the homing missile, what we want to have happen is we need to add an FSM to it. And first thing I want to have happen is we need to have it look at and move towards the player. That's all I'm really wanting this thing to do. So what we'll want to do in this case is we want to look at, okay, that's one of these wonderful physics terms, look at, and then the second thing we want to do is translate. Okay, so one's going to be for its direction, the second one is going to be for the movement. Okay, really simple stuff actually. So the first thing we want to have happen is with the look at, okay, make sure the look at is on top of the translate, right? We want it to look first, and look and point first, then move. So in this case, go ahead with translate. I believe the vector will be X. Not 100% sure, but we're going to run with it. So X of say 5 per second to every frame. The game object we want it to look at is not going to be the owner, okay? Or the game object we want to look at is going to be the owner. The target that we want it to have is going to be our player. So over here, here's our player, boom, boom, boom. That up vector is fine, keep vertical, all this kind of wonderful stuff. And then I'm going to take said homing missile and I'm going to move it out of the way and hit play. As you can see, it's trying its darnness to get to us, but it's kind of flying around in the wrong direction. So what this tells me, just by looking at it, is we can see that since the Z angle here is always pointed at my player, that means that our translate should be Z, not X. Okay, so let's go with the 5 on the Z. All right, that way it should now move towards our player. All right, that's just one of those little helpful hints to how you can solve problems if things aren't moving like they want to. Just pay attention to where these arrows are going. So here we go. Now it's looking towards our guy, and actually now it's perfect. It homed into it, well, or at least is homed in on top of our head. And as I move my character, you'll see that it's gonna follow me no matter what I do. But it's not gonna make contact with me. The reason for this is because this keep vertical is enabled. If that turns off, it'll go straight towards me. Okay, so in order to make a complete homing missile, we want to turn off the vertical, okay, and then here's our move, our look at, and our vector. All right, you can control the speed with the wonderful Z speed over here. You know, bigger the number, the faster the speed. All right, so this is going to be our first FSM, and I want to call this one movement. Okay. And then let's add another FSM to the homing missile, and this one should basically be exactly like a what you calls it, the bullets. Okay, it's basically going to be a thing where you have, matter of fact, let's just go ahead and copy it. So if I go to my monster bullet here, go to Playmaker, Project, Monster Bullet, Inspector, go ahead, Edit. Go back to Playmaker, and we have our die and our kill self. So we'll go ahead and just kind of select these and copy those states, click back on our homing missile, and go ahead and paste the states and say yes. Alright, so now we have our first one, which will on collision destroy itself, okay, with things. So now when we hit play, and with the homing missile, that once it makes contact with our player, it blows up. Okay, I gotta figure out why that weird green thing's moving around, but there you go. There's your basic homing missile, just kind of doing its thing. You know, boom, right? Okay, greatness on that. All right, so taking this homing missile and taking what we just learned with the with its basic movement, which is going to be, again, look at and translate. How can we turn this into something that that will work off of being it'll home in on the player, but it has to have a range. Okay, the way I want to do this is with creating a trigger. So here's our homing missile, and then what I want to do is let's do a create other. Let's go with these capsule. Let's take a capsule. All right, something like the player, right? So we'll have the capsule collider. This is going to be our let's call it our homing monster. All right. This one I want to make kind of like a zombie, I guess you could say. So the first thing we want to do is add template. We want to go ahead and add our FSM to our homing monster. Set him to 0, 0, 0. Why? Because that works best. Go ahead and add the FSM to it. Alright, so here I'm just going to go ahead and go to, because we want it to be able to be killed just like all the rest of them. So go ahead and add that health drop template, right? So that's the first thing we're going to add to the monster, so it can be shot and killed. And then the second thing we want to add to it is actually another object. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create another object. This is going to be a sphere, okay? And I'm going to drag that into our homing monster. All right, see how it's now parented right here? Now this sphere is going to be, it's going to be, call this homing range, okay? So that's what we want to have it make this thing part of, is our homing range. Now at the moment, as you can see, it's not much, and we need to set this back to 0, 0, 0 so it stays, again, parented to our homing monster, which I can move out of the way now. So now we have this wonderful guy here with a homing range inside of it. So let's scale this up. Okay, so we have something kind of like that. Let's say that looks like a pretty good homing range, maybe a little less for testing for right now, but we can't see jack diddly through that. So let's go add our ghost, right, material to that, and now you can see it has this nice kind of shaded sphere. Okay, that's going to be the range of our homing monster. All right, now the way this is going to work is very, very similar to how our health system ended up working. So what I want to have happen is we want our homing monster, and at the start of the game, so let's go ahead and add a new template. So here's Playmaker. We need to go to add FSM. All right. And at the very beginning, I don't want to do anything. Okay, I just want them basically to be idle. It's kind of like it's asleep. Okay, and when something happens, I want it to when this trigger is activated, then we want the missile to home into it. So homing sphere, make sure this is trigger is selected. If not, things are just going to bounce off of it. And then what we want to have happen is an event. Okay, I want to add an event to it, and I want to call this thing, let's just call it event. Okay, and make sure the little checkbox is checked, so that's a global event, right? Okay, you can check the event browser, and down here where it says event, okay, that means it's now a nice global event. And when that happens, okay, I'll go by homing missile, this wonderful thing here, go ahead and copy this state, go back to our homing monster and paste the state. No, I don't want it to be in my default, and I'll call this thing home, right? and then add the transition event and connect it. Okay, so once activated, it's going to home in on the target. Okay, like an angry dog or something. I don't know, but that's going to home. It's going to look at our player, and it's going to translate towards his position. All right. So here's our homing range, and what we want to have the homing range do is we need to add FSM to it, and go back towards our, again, it's kind of like our health manager did, right? When we have a life bar, and we had it heal, we had it hurt, and the health pack ended up sending this event, right? Trigger event, and then had the finish where it sent the event. We're going to do the exact same thing to our homing range here. So first thing I want to do is have our action browser, go to physics, go to trigger event, and on trigger enter the player. Okay, so when the player enters this this trigger, this thing here, send event, and we'll say let's call this one on. Okay, so send event on, add transition on, and then add a new state. So when it's triggered, all we want it to do is go to state machine, send event. Okay, well, where'd you go? Send event. There it is. All right, add that action, and we want it to send the event to a game object FSM. The game object is going to be, in this case, homing monster. Okay, and then the FSM will be FSM, and the event we want to send is going to need to be event, right? So send event, event. There we go. It's FSM2. Let me double check real quick. Yeah, so it's going to be FSM2. So FSM2, so our game object, and we're going to use the homing monster, we're going to send event, and that's all we're going to do. All right, so that's all. That should be all we need to do. So here's our homing monster. Let's move it over on the side. All right, getting some crazy number of things going on in our little level here. All right, so this is our homing monster. If it's going to be zombified, it needs to be zombie green. So monster green. There we go, homing monster. So it's green. Here's our guy. Go ahead and move this guy back. Move our player over, and then go ahead and hit start. And as you see, as we're outside, when we step in, it's going to home right towards us and stay after us and collide with us and go flying everywhere and all that kind of wonderfulness. So, but at its core, it is going to work, and it is working to kind of home into our player. In this case, it's flying all over the map and all that, trying to chase after us. So there's some refinements that'll have to be done to it, but what we have is we have our homing range, okay, and then we have our homing monster. And they're working very well together, I guess you could say. So look at, have our translate, in this case, keep the vertical on so that it stays flat, right? So we can jump over it and it's going to track us from the ground, right? That works a little better, right? So there's our monster, there's our other monsters, and it's chasing after us the whole time. Now this is interesting because once we move outside the trigger box, it's still going to be after us because we don't have we don't have anything turned off on our thing. So it's kind of a once activated, always activated kind of situation. So there's the homing monster. Just gonna go ahead and kill the homing monster because he was kind of annoying me. So once we have that kind of set up, we have our homing monsters, we have missiles, we have all these kind of things. So that's our three basic kinds of monsters. And let's start putting all the pieces back together again next.